שלום וברוכים הבאים לפסטיבל דוק אביב ה-22 ולתחרות הבינלאומית. אנחנו שמחים לארח בפסטיבל היום את ביל וטרנר רוס, במאי הסרט סיבוב אחרון. אנחנו ננהל איתם עכשיו שיחה באורך של חצי שעה. אנחנו מאוד מזמינים אתכם להשאיר שאלות ב-Q&A, אתם תראו אייקון קטן באמצע ימין של המסך, אתם יכולים להשאיר את השאלות גם בעברית, ואני אתרגם אותם. אלו ביניכם שרואים אותנו בפייסבוק, אתם מוזמנים להשאיר גם שאלות שם, אני מקווה שנספיק לקרוא אותם. בבקשה, אל תשתמשו בפונקציה של הצ'אט, ועכשיו באנגלית. Hello and welcome to the 22nd Doc Aviv Film Festival and to the international competition. We're very honored and happy to have here with us today Bill and Turner Ross, the filmmakers of Bloody Nose, Empty Pockets. We're going to have a 30-minute webinar right now. If you have any questions, please leave them in the Q&A section. You can see it in the bottom of the screen, center right. Please do not use the chat function. So, hi, how are you guys?
Hi, we're doing all right. Very good. Yeah, considering.
Yeah, in the hot New Orleans. I mean, we talked earlier a little bit before we started, and I said that I know that there are a lot of questions about how you made the film and how you kind of like, picked the setting. But I actually want to start from like a slightly different perspective. I watched the film before the corona, and getting back to it now, all of a sudden what hit me is how, you created this bubble, this space that is very much about being together. And I wanted to start actually by asking you about this space. How do you perceive it also now, after, the last few months where the question of what does it mean to be together became very strange and somehow denaturalized.
Yeah, we wish we could go back to the Roaring '20s. That is for sure.
Yeah, there's no way, that we could have imagined the future in which this film would arrive. The themes are the same, as we envisioned at the beginning, which is it's a film about the end of something and walking out into uncertain futures. And, certainly we're living through that kind of moment right now. I wouldn't, even if we could have imagined that world, I don't know that I would have wanted to steer towards that. But yeah, it certainly has had a different resonance now as we've arrived here, because we are missing these communities, whatever those communities may be to people. For the sake of our film, it's a bar space, and it's not only the alcohol that brings people together, but the camaraderie, the sense of community, the release, the sense of family, whatever that may be. They all espouse that throughout the film in their own individual ways. But also underneath all of that, the conversations that we always have with each other are often deeper than the ostensible story that we might be telling. And certainly, as Americans making this film here, we made it at a time when it seemed like our country was very fractured, and we were losing that kind of fluidity and companionship, that sense of togetherness as an identity, and choosing different identities, and going off into an uncertain future. Now, certainly that has been exacerbated in the ensuing years since we conceived it, but those themes remain the same for us, and I think are even more entrenched in the world in which it arrives.
I mean, it's fascinating for me that you say that, because the next thing I wanted to ask is actually, not about the inside of the bar, but actually about the outside, or, what does it mean to make a film about this, the community that is, being sustained within the bar in Trump's America, which become a more and more polarized society. And in general, your films were always about this kind of like, I think I read in one interview about Americana, right? This kind of like I would call it like social intimacies of American life. And why a bar? In the midst of this extremely difficult period in U.S. history of the 20th century, where things falling apart, where social interactions become more and more polarized and hostile. Why a bar?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of answers to that. This had sort of been in our back pocket for a long time. We, grew up, being taken to places like that. And it was always sort of fascinating as kids to sit there at the end of the bar and like look at, these larger than life characters telling these wild stories. And so it always attracted us as a space where, just about anything can happen. But yeah, it around 2016, it just seemed like it seemed like the right way to sort of tackle the current situation.
We knew it was a space that we wanted to exist in at some point, because it's often a reference point in our lives, and in the process by which we work, we often go into towns, whether we be traveling or working on something, and you try to find the spot where you're going to meet some local folks, to be your fixers, to learn some things. And so for us, that was a fascinating place, because it's at once a practical space. You go there to get your immediate needs met. I need shelter, or I need refreshment, but also these sort of, more esoteric needs. And for us, it was a space always, like Bill said, where you make stories and also where you tell them. And especially in this moment, it seemed like a space where maybe we could use that as a theater of people, so that they could speak to each other. And we wanted to see what people had to say when they weren't talking about what we're always talking about all the time. And that worked for us. Yeah, as portraiture, that was a space that we love and have, and the people within are people we have empathy for. And but it was also very functional in terms of trying to create a sense of community and conversation within four walls in a brief period of time.
I mean, just to respond to that, it strikes me because there is this kind of like cinematic convention of a bar in American cinema as being this kind of like, kind of like collective confessional space. It is a place where, like we always see, if someone wants to get someone to tell a story, they put them in a bar in front of the bartender, and it's this space of you're never alone, right? It's a space of chattiness in a way. And is it important that the bar is closing?
Yeah, it was, we needed to create some sort of framework for everybody to play in. And, it was speaking to the time, again, in 2016, it seemed like things were changing quite a bit, and so that was the.
It's a bar called the Roaring Twenties, and it's closing down. So you can talk about myriad things. What is it? What's pushing it out? Gentrification, practical elements, or what is actually sort of psychically happening there? Well, it's the end of an era. It's the end of something for these people. And then in a practical sense, because we're working primarily with non-actors, or at least people who haven't been in improvisatory environments before, it gave them a simple framework. You're here because you belong here. This is a place that you love and where you belong. And after tonight, it won't be a part of your lives anymore. That becomes really easy to deal with. So it acted on multiple levels for us.
It's interesting that you're talking about the reason why it's closed, because what I really remember is, the kind of like the shots. I think it's the opening shot, and there's a few at the middle where we leave the space, and all of a sudden the bar feels like an island. There is such a so it's like the last resort, also in that sense. Because there is such a, I remember, there is a bridge, and then there is the highway, or like a main street that leads us into the bar at the very opening. There is a question from the audience about the specificity of LA. Why was it important for you that the bar would be in LA?
In Vegas.
Sorry.
Yeah.
What was the question, I think? Sorry, in Vegas. Okay,
No,
sorry, yeah.
Vegas was always part of our conceit. It was the root of this conversation that has lasted at least a decade. And without getting too in the weeds with it, it's a place that's also been important in our lives for different reasons. But it also speaks to this, this American mythology. It's this bastion of excess in the desert, literally an oasis. And so what exists on the outskirts, in the darkness, in the shadows of the bright lights? What is the effluent of an oasis? Why do you seek an oasis within this mythological, oasis of America? And what are you hiding from, or what are you finding protection from? And then visually, it's that as well. It is this bright, shining light in a desert out in the middle of nowhere. So as a framing device, that was important to us. But then also practically, 10 years ago, we were scouting an idea, a version of this project, and it was during the recession in 2009. And we saw a lot of people really living on the fringes, even while planes are consistently flying into McCarran, and people are going to, the Disneyland of America, and they can go to they can go to Caesar's Palace, they can go to the Eiffel Tower, they can go to New York. You can literally be anywhere in the world on this one strip. But right outside of there were people, whole families living in derelict hotel rooms, and people being pushed out and not trying to find escapism, but literally escaping from lives that were falling apart. And that kind of backdropping really stuck with us. So while it really is mostly in terms of the film, just a framework, just sort of a setting, for us that spoke to a lot and spoke to things that we actually witnessed. And that's where we wanted this world to land, the outskirts of everything, sort of the edge of the earth. And where do you go once you can't go there anymore?
Yeah, it's, you mentioned working with non-actors, and we said that we're going to open up the question of hybridity, or how we worked on this film. What is striking for me, I was talking with a friend who's a film scholar and critic, and he said that, before he knew more about the film, he was very excited about how, he said it was the ultimate cinema verite. It's like the documentary of the documentary. And in the tradition of documentary, we don't talk about non-actors, we talk about social actors. So, it's not that people represent themselves, they represent a larger social phenomena. And for me, the bar is a social actor in a way. So I wanted to ask you about this tension between the authenticity, if we can even use this word, of the situation or the characters or the space, and between the way you framed things or designed them.
Yeah, like with all our films, they exist somewhere between, straight documentation and total fiction. So with each film, we cast the film, whether that person is being asked to just be themselves, or in this case, be themselves with a slight framing. Yeah. But, all films, at their root are documentaries. It's just some people are, staging plays in front of the camera rather than letting life unfold naturally, or somewhat naturally. So,
and I think authenticity is a good word, and really what we are most often after. We are after truth rather than facts. And ever proclaimed to be journalists. We've been welcomed by the nonfiction community, and we've always been very open about how we make these things. When we embarked on this path together through these films, what we wanted to do was explore our ideas together, to go out into the world and see, what we could pull from to make these things, and to always be able to make them with a very small footprint, just he and I together out there in the world. And it often means that we are mining natural resources, as it were, finding, if we want these people in this bar space, well, we don't want somebody to come in and pretend to know about this world or what they're talking about. We want the people who authentically can represent that point of view, who can speak from a deep well of experience. And so when they're interacting with each other, they can't help but give an honest perspective of their experience.
I mean, I have some more questions about it, but I actually want to give more room to the audience. And so I want to kind of like read to you some of the questions that I'm getting here. So someone asked, as we saw one of the characters taking pictures, was the ending montage planned or there was a different ending?
That's a great question. We have not been asked that. It was not planned. Those pictures ended up being great, and that's why we threw them in.
Yeah, they were just disposable cameras set up around the bar, and people took pictures if they wanted to. And later, when we developed them, we realized, wow, this is an even keener sense of their experience, and kind of a great way to pull back the veneer at the end.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a short question that's kind of related. Did you actually shoot it in one evening, or did the shooting, because the sense of time in the film is so condensed, it's so punctual. And you know, the way you frame it is that it takes place over one night. So did you actually shoot it over one night?
Majority of it, yes. It was a 18-hour unbroken, you know, start to finish shoot. Now there were other shoots, but it was to supplement that one 18-hour shoot. So,
and to build the world, because we wanted linear continuity.
Like all the stuff outside the bar were different shoots. So.
And again, we're putting all of these people in a space, and while they're responding to an imposed I guess structural idea, guys, this is your bar, this is closing, here's where you are. Much of that artifice wore off for the participants very early on. So we knew that if we just kept them there and kept those relationships coming.
It makes it sound like we had them trapped.
Well, not trapped, but it's just like, if we didn't break the spell, is more what I'm saying. Then the first person who comes in claims his space. When the second person comes in, there's already a dynamic. By the time the third and fourth person come in, they've built
just going. Yeah.
And so really they started to, in real time, write their own narrative. And because the bulk of the film happened within these 18 hours, they were able to very organically create a linear narrative that then we could use as the skeleton of the film.
It's really interesting what happened with the end montage of the still images and what's happening with the shooting itself, and how they kind of like reflect on each other in the sense that both of them creating a sequence. And I think that, you know, with this, I mean, I'm asking about time because with this ending montage, I really felt like, oh, we've been through something. And the characters been, I mean, or the people been through something, and you've been, I mean, you know, they see you also in these pictures, which is really nice. So, it really gives this kind of like sense of duration, although it steals.
Yeah. Once we put those pictures in the timeline and started putting them to music, it was pretty obvious. Like, it does feel like you've been through something. It memorializes what, you know, you've just been through, and it tells you that this has passed. So it ended up being very effective, but it was by chance that ended up working out.
Okay, guys, I have a few questions from the audience, so I'm going to read it to you. Hopefully we have enough time. There was a really interesting use of sound, going back and forth from live dialogue sound to the music and TV on the bar. Oh my God, the TV, I have so many questions about it. How were you able to record it all, and the way, and why the TV was important for the bar sounds in the movie?
Well, the answer to that is complicated. The short answer is it was a nightmare to capture all that sound. We probably for the first 20 minutes of shooting, we had the jukebox off. We had hoped that by having the jukebox off, we would, you know, capture clean dialogue and all that stuff. But about 20 minutes in, everybody in the film sort of mutinied against us and said that they would not be in a bar all day without, you know, music. So
it's messy editorially, but it actually did something very interesting for us, in that the music and that oral environment became its own character. Yeah. So at the beginning of the day, when you have, you know, an older set, they're trying to be in their happy place. Well, what are they going to listen to? They're going to listen to the music they listened to when they were young. And by the time you get to the end of the day, when you've got some younger people coming in, they're playing a different era of music. And so it creates its own narrative of character and backstory and emotion that was, you know, mostly brought to you by the participants themselves.
Reading the question again. Make sure we
Yes, there. I mean, I don't know if you can see also the Q&A. I'm going to put a few of them together, but
Okay.
there is a question about the casting, but also there are like two different questions about the veteran. So of course, the scene that the veteran is crying, but also the kind of refuge that the veteran find in the bar,
Mhm.
and what is significant to you.
Yeah, Bruce is the veteran, the older man, and is absolutely authentic, is absolutely being himself, and his emotions are extremely close to the surface. Our whole family has a tradition of military service. There were more than one veteran in the bar. They certainly were vocal about their experience as veterans and subsequently as Americans. But Bruce is a really special case because he, I think more than anybody in that bar, came there with, really just open to the experience. He gave so much of himself and is really telling his life story over a long period of time. It's concise in the film, but he gave a lot. And by the time that bar closes, he was so sad to lose that space, even though it was temporary and he knew it. That those emotions are very real. And it was really profound with Bruce. I've talked to him just about every week in the years since. Yeah, he's an auto mechanic and lives a very simple life and is very much missing 24-hour bars during the pandemic here. But yeah, he represented a lot to us, and also was just one of these incredible humans for whom everything is just really close to the surface. And I think you read it in every line of his face.
And where did you find the characters for the film?
Different stories for each. Some were folks we knew from our life. Probably 2/3 came from we did like bar casting. So we went all over New Orleans to just about every dive bar, and we would have our camera and just hang out, and if people wanted to talk to us, we'd talk, and if they were interesting, the conversation continued. So
and we interviewed hundreds of people. Yeah. But in the end, we really wanted to make sure that we were filling out the room, not only making a composite world of what makes a bar room so dynamic, but really thinking about archetypes and representative roles, so that when those conversations were happening and when that visual language is being transposed there, that everyone has a very specific reason and there are no duplicates or redundancies. So we talked a lot about that, because if you get that right, then there's an alchemy in the bar, and hopefully it creates something of its own, because everyone has license to speak.
It strikes me that the people that you recruited or casted for this really had to trust you, which brings me to a question that someone raised in the Q&A about whether or not they got to know the other people in advance, or was it all spontaneous?
Some folks knew each other ahead of time. A lot of it was spontaneous, but these are folks that are very accustomed to bar life, so they're making acquaintances very quickly, and very quickly they feel like they've known each other forever.
But there also were minor dynamics that arrived in the bar, like Lowell and Pam are old friends, and David and Kamari did know each other going in. So there were little dynamics that then created larger sort of alliances, I guess. But everyone, and part of the distancing mechanism of the artifice that lies at the structure of this thing was making sure there was a distancing mechanism between again, between fact and truth. We wanted a truthful, authentic space, but we didn't want to get mired in the facts of a place that was closing and sort of the ethics of sneaking into a place and saying, all right, we're here to document it. We wanted everybody to step away at a certain distance and say, here's what we're doing. If you want to be part of it, you have to come to us. And here's what we're after. And we're all complicit in this. And there's a great level of trust. We all know what we hope to do and what we're doing and how we're doing it, but we don't know where we're going. And in that way, we were able to assemble this incredible group of people, and we all came together to do this thing together, so that we were shooting with these people, not at them, and that we were going through a holistic experience together.
And I mean, the other thing that I wanted to ask you, I mean, watching the film, I thought, it takes quite a few maneuvers to understand how to shoot this space, and especially when you want to convey intimacy. So we talked about the familiarity of people with each other, but I wanted to ask you about your familiarity with the space itself, or how you positioned yourself in the space.
Well, at this point, Turner and I had worked together for so long that, I'd like to think that we've gotten pretty good at dancing with each other, playing off of each other. I can, out of the corner of my eye, I can sort of tell what he's up to without us even having to talk. And, but yeah, I mean, we were, as far as familiarity with the place, we've been in that place quite a bit leading up to it.
We also spent a lot of our lives in bar rooms, and part of this is an ode to that. Is sort of a love song to what light looks like coming through a window at different times of day, and these spaces that people live within, and so that was equally as important. The bar is a character in itself, but within that, we also knew, while this was all happening all at once, that was part of the excitement. It was part of the athleticism of it. We had to stay tuned in the entire time to be able to receive, because even though we had intentions and hopes and aspirations for it, we also set up a situation in which we would just have to be present for whatever happened. And that we're good at. If we've learned anything along the way, it's to be able to respond to something. But that also comes with months and years of thinking about what this wants to be, and what are the little nuances that we know that we need to capture, and just having that in the bone before we even started. Then it allowed it to just be, like Bill said, kind of a dance, and to be there and be present for it.
There is a question about the scenes with the teenagers, and the question is, were these more scripted than the others, or were they completely spontaneous? I mean, being familiar with some of your past work, I know that you have this access toward kids and teenagers, and I want to ask, if you can say a little bit about these scenes and how we worked with them.
We were definitely those kids once. And it doesn't take much, really. You just say, okay, well, those are really three friends, and that really is the bartender's son. So that's already in play. And it's like, all right, guys, you're going to be in a movie. They're really excited. They say, okay, well, we're going to be as cool as possible. And I cut that off at the knees and say, no, you're already cool. Don't worry about it. What would you be doing right now if we weren't doing this? Oh, well, probably, sitting in the alley, getting stoned or something,
All right, let's do that.
Well, okay. And that specifically with the kid was really a situation where it was just like, here's the map of your environment, just go. And we just spent time sort of shooting a separate movie with them, just because we're only using little pieces, sort of those defining pieces, and then Trey, the son, is integrated into the bar itself, and that speaks to bigger things. But for them, we just wanted those really serendipitous hangout moments that teenage kids know how to live within.
There are like two questions that I think I'm going to combine into one, also because they're from the same person. So how did the idea of making such an unconventional movie came about? It's obviously different from your previous projects. And do you think that you'll make another movie in a similar way, or go back to a more traditional documentary?
Trying to figure that out right now.
I normally don't ask people about what is their next project. First of all, not to hit some sensitive spots, but also because I don't know. But maybe you want to talk a little bit about this.
Absolutely, and it really is a conversation that we don't need to divulge what our next project is. That's kind of beside the point. For us, this is an evolution of work over a long period of time, and never once have either of us looked at the other and said, let's make a new documentary. It's always, I've got an idea. How can we get to it? And so over the course of these films that people know, these 5 features, and also especially in the stuff that we just make privately with ourselves, it's been an evolution of, from going out into the world and casting a broad net and basically fishing to find things and letting it speak to us like reading tarot cards, to harnessing that over time and saying, well, we can be more acute with our intentions at the front so that we can find the most descriptive dynamic moment. And after making the previous film, this concert film within 4 walls, on multiple nights, with consistent routines, with planted characters, with a bigger crew, we realized, well, yeah, you can actually get to the authenticity and truth of something without having to tell the facts. And so we said, well, let's reduce that. Let's get rid of all of the trappings. Let's go back to just handmade movie, you and I together, and we can do this in 4 walls. And I think if our hypothesis pays out, we can create more of an intentional community and still be present to receive something, some elements of human honesty, and still have a spontaneous environment that we have to respond to, and in which there will be serendipity and danger, and keeps it exciting, even though it might, there might be more of a degree of structure and artifice. And I think we learned a lot from it, and certainly, we're not going to devolve. So I think the answer would be, yeah, we learned a lot from that, and I would expect to continue to take those things and push them further.
I'm going to read you one more question. I read somewhere that the original cut of the film was 4 hours. Any chance to see the director's cut at some point in the future? Yay, please.
You don't want to see that.
No.
No.
Someday maybe we can just have a beer if you find us, and we can spend 4 hours that way.
Yeah, we
just about the same.
It's taken on this mythical quality, but I went back and went through it the other day, and there's no need to watch that. We loved it, but I think we arrived exactly what it needed to be.
I want to ask you about influences. I mean, I know I really like your answer about it's about the idea. It's not about categorization, and it's about the kind of the human experience that we want to not only to capture but to create. When we talked about the film in our meetings for the festival, we often refer to Cassavetes as a huge influence. I already mentioned the Verite, but I mean, I wanted to ask if you came to it. I mean, we talked about the familiarity was bars, but if you came to it, was also like a certain visual perception that was informed by filmmakers who influenced you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this wall back here that is now empty because we need to fill it for our next film was filled with inspiration and reference.
Yeah.
And always is. We're always feeding off what came before. There's always more to learn from, and sometimes we don't even realize those influences or references until after we've done them. But yeah, I mean, and the film itself, the look of the film, sort of the flavor and color and texture of it is very much an homage to the types of films and era, specifically of filmmaking that we were watching, in which Sir Cassavetes is making work, but you're also having ultra independent films like The Exiles being made, and
Dusty and Sweets
McGee. What was the show, Taxi? Or it's just like there's so much within that era where it felt hardscrabble and lived in and tactile and human, and a little bit messy and dangerous, and we fed off of that a lot.
Yeah,
And
it felt
still
handmade.
And
Yeah. Well, I have a question which is a bit kind of like sad maybe, but do you feel that you captured something that is already gone? A space that is no longer exist, or a sort of, social texture or human texture that we're losing or already lost?
Well, gone at the moment.
Yeah.
I hope not, though. I don't think so. I think there will always be a desire for that kind of community, and yeah.
But to be fair, some people have lost those spaces.
Yeah.
Some people have lost those people. But I don't think that story is new, although there may be some specificity to it in terms of, contemporary themes. But if you went 50 years ago, there would have been a nostalgia by the old timers in a bar somewhere for a previous era. And so yeah, I think at once it's always being lost, and that hopefully, there is more. Hopefully, we haven't lost it entirely. But so long as there's humanity and a need for places to hide, I think we'll have them.
I mean, I don't want to dwell too much into the kind of like political context, but with this question, and also like when I saw the film, I was thinking about a conversation that I had with a taxi driver. I think it was in Salt Lake City. So I think the other spaces after bar that is kind of like this confessional space is, CAPS. And it was before the elections. And the sentiment that the person was expressing is about like feeling, in a way, disenfranchised, or that that their community texture, or that their country has been taken away from them. Now, this is a very problematic sentiment, right? I mean, because it fed the right-wing campaign, but also it is true that, people all over the world, but in the US also, are living in a very alienated society. And I don't know where I'm heading with this question, but I guess that I'm trying to get some hope from you. What were you hoping?
You're not going to find it.
Yeah, I don't know.
No.
That's very much where our minds are at the moment, because while that conversation was true for you, and we certainly heard it as well, and it led to this film, those conversations have only become more emboldened, and those sort of ideologies, these feelings of otherness, separation, of disenfranchisement, of not having what you deserve, these sort of, and it's the world over, maybe in different framing, but it's certainly a part of the American dream, upward mobility, and you deserve it, and the uniqueness of the person, and I think there's a lot to learn from the prevalence of those kind of sentiments, and it's very much where our heads are at. I don't know what's hopeful about it, but.
Guys, thank you so much. Not only for this like really fascinating conversation, but also for a beautiful film that, for me, as much as it was maybe a little bit staged, it was like really spontaneous in a way, and intimate, and very, very moving. So yeah, thank you for this experience. It was beautiful.
Thank you so much, and everyone who watched or is watching. It's just it is a blessing in a weird year to have an audience and have these conversations, and we're very grateful.
Yes, thanks.
Of course. Oh, and to the person that's asked about the music, I'll send you a link to the soundtrack. I didn't forget that. I saw you on the thread there.
Yeah, there is also another question that came last minute, but it's there. I don't know if you want to pick it up, send it to the festival. We'll make sure we pass it on.
Best Blank is always an influence. It was just the two of us.
Yeah.
And support system
outside the bar, but
it was a crazy
majority.
We should let you go. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.